There is a quote that goes around the internet, and I'm not really sure who the originator of it is, but it's a very good quote. It goes something along the lines of, periodically progressives reverse engineer traditional behavior and act like they've discovered Atlantis. And it's because it's true. And we keep seeing examples of this. For example, patriotism. Here's a progressive case for reducing immigration. What could this revolve around? The chap who writes this, Philip Cafaro, says, I'm a philosophy professor specializing in ethics and political philosophy. Like many of my fellow academics, I'm a political progressive. I value economic security for workers and their families and a much more equal distribution of wealth, strong, well-enforced environmental protection laws, and an end to racial discrimination in the United States. I want to maximize the political power of common citizens and limit the influence of large corporations. I also want to reduce immigration into the United States. If this combination strikes you as odd, you aren't alone. Friends, political allies, even my mother, the social worker, shake their heads or worse when I bring up the subject. I've been called a nativist, a racist, thankfully not by my mother, been picketed on my own campus, and I have had close academic friendships strained. Why? If we increase immigration, many hardworking men and women will continue to see their economic fortunes decline.
Yeah.
Mass immigration is an economic attack against the working class.
But I think it's favoured from a GDP perspective because the leaders of the country can basically say, well, I rule a country of 80 million, not 60 million. So the GDP is greater. Even if the GDP per capita is lower and the society is crumbling into atoms beneath me, I'm still a bigger ruler.
And that is why the very measurement of GDP is the tool of the neoliberal international elite.
Yes.
You're listening, progressives. Anyway, so he says, acknowledging trade-offs is the beginning of wisdom. We should not exaggerate conflicts or imagine where they don't exist, neither can we ignore them. And that's where you're wrong, kiddo. I mean, they've been ignoring them for years, and I don't think they're going to start acknowledging they may have made a mistake now. But you can see that this is exactly the right-wing argument against mass economic immigration. There are other arguments, but he obviously doesn't care about those because he's progressive, but he has arrived at the correct position, which is, hang on a second, this is actually an attack on the poorest and most vulnerable classes of our society for the interests of those at the very top.
And we only cared about it when there was a racial disparity because we don't like certain races.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
So we've come around to patriotism, maybe not hurting the people who live alongside us is good.
Yeah.
And so the next thing we get to is abstinence.
Oh.
Never thought you'd hear that, right? So in America, from 2019 to now, the Republicans have been on the march, deciding, right, we've had enough of the abortions. You're murdering babies, and you seem to be utterly unrepentant about it, and you seem to want to do it up until the point of birth or beyond, and this is frankly evil, and we're not having any more of it. And honestly, given the way that progressives have acted, it's hard to say they're wrong. And so Hollywood celebrities were like, right, that's it. You're not having access to our vaginas, to which I'm sure most men were like, never did anyway. What are you talking about? So Alyssa Milano was like, right, we're going to have a sex strike against these Georgia abortion laws. Our reproductive rights are being erased. Therefore, we won't reproduce. Until women have legal control over their own bodies, we cannot risk pregnancy. Join me. Like pregnancy is a death sentence or something. Join me by not having sex until we get bodily autonomy back. I'm calling for a sex strike, pass it on, she tweets. And this was followed up in 2021 with Bette Midler getting sex right. Anyone want to have sex with Bette Midler these days?
I don't know who Bette Midler is, I'm afraid.
She's a very old actress. So she says, I suggest that women refuse to have sex with men until they are guaranteed the right to choose by Congress. This was, I think this was the Texas one. Yeah, it was Texas. Because they're not happy about that, of course. So we have discovered that abstinence, it is not only possible, but it can get women what they want.
So my first encounter with this idea was Aristophanes' Lysistrata.
That's correct, and there's a lot of talk.
500 years old.
Yes, there is a lot of talk about the Lysistrata, and they point out, well, hang on a second. Well, we'll get to it in a second.
It was a comedy. So
it was a comedy, but it was also written by a man.
Yeah.
So, but the sex strikes aren't new. You know, they've been around for a long time. But we've discovered that abstinence works. Abstinence prevents pregnancy, and therefore it prevents abortion. And so we've arrived at the conservative position. So you get articles like this from Salon, the crying soy face. No, withholding sex isn't the answer. We can't stop being whores for God's sake. That's literally the conservative position. Like, we can't do that. So perhaps one could exclude this sort of reductive gender essentialist thinking because a man wrote it in 411 BC. Speaking there of Aristophanes, but this is insultingly limited for its time. Even if everyone abided by such heteronormative definitions, calling such strikes as embarrassingly out of touch and glib, all the more when matters are so grave in Texas and soon for the rest of the country. Matters so grave. Matters so grave. We're not allowed to murder babies. We've got to stop having sex with everything that moves, and then not murder the babies we're getting impregnated with. My God, matters are so grave. Like, God, how awful for you. I'm so sorry this is happening to you, ladies. I'll ask those babies to just volunteer themselves. There is a pervasive sense of whiteness and white liberal femininity emitted by these strikes. Wait a minute. Abstinence is white supremacy. What are you saying? What are you saying about black women?
That's a very good point.
What are you saying? You are saying we can't expect minority women to have sexual self-control. That's what you're saying. Margaret Sanger must be like, yeah, I told you. Yeah. I don't support any of this, by the way. I disavow completely. But that's what you're saying, right? And of course, the next one is just, you're playing right into the hands of the misogynists. And it's like, yeah, it seems to be. The activist proposal dances perilously close to the argument that if women could stop having sexual pleasure, we wouldn't need to terminate pregnancy at all. Yeah, because that's what you've arrived at. Because it's true. Basically, I'm going to skip over this argument just to get to the next one. So the third discovery that the progressives have made is that actually monogamy is a good idea.
Wow.
I know.
Stunning and brave.
Call me a trad wife, but polyamory isn't praxis. Oh yeah. The desire for human exclusivity, loyalty, and love is destroying the Marxism within her. She says, declaring your devotion to just one imperfect person is a refusal of a disposable attitude to relationships. What? You're going to get married and not get divorced? Like, what are you talking about? This is not leftism. This is raw traditional conservatism pouring out of Novara Media. Like, what is this? They reason themselves around to their grandmother's opinion. That doesn't mean subordinating yourself to someone else's demands or getting bogged down in abusive power dynamics, but monogamy does suggest a dedication to something bigger than yourself, something known to be extremely difficult. The metaphysical construct of marriage, the sanctity that you should be preserving. We've arrived back at 300 years ago.
Goodness.
In refusing other options, they acknowledge that love and care are impossible to calculate your price up and are often complicated by feelings of boredom, irritation, anger, and jealousy. The challenge is to stick with it rather than to twist. Well, that's exactly what your nan would have said.
It's almost a stoic attitude towards the difficulties of relationships.
Exactly. This is a refutation of polyamory. But the thing is, how are you going to sell traditionalism to progressives?
You have to probably slap an adjective on it, don't you?
That's correct. And there's only one adjective that'll do.
Revolutionary?
Radical.
Ah.
I mean, they could have used revolutionary, so there's two they could do. Radical monogamy. There's a new type of relationship in town, say Vice. Bravo. Pat yourselves on the back for discovering radical monogamy. This is going to be the wave of the future. This is going to revolutionize what life is.
Guys, conservatives, shut up. We've discovered monogamy, right? We have this thing called marriage, right? And that way, oh my goodness, these guys.
A man and a woman are going to get together, stay together for their entire lives and have children, and that's progressive. I love this so much. There's a pretty high chance you haven't yet heard of radical monogamy. Well, that's because you just made it up. Before writing this piece, I asked around to see if anyone knew the term. The most common response was, what WTF is that? Monogamy is the building block of the traditional cis-het relationships, after all, unless you're in a queer relationship in an anti-queer country, for example. So what the hell's so radical about monogamy? But look, it's a thing now. One of radical monogamy's most prominent advocates is Boston-based Robin Ochs, an educator, speaker, and grassroots activist who edits By Women Quarterly. Ochs said her own journey towards embracing radical monogamy involved a lot of self-scrutiny and questioning the cis-het status quo. To explain the concept, she draws contrast between reflexive monogamy, which is blindly accepting it, somehow morally superior, just have one sexual partner, and more informed and conscious choice of radical monogamy. So monogamy, normal monogamy, is just you accepting the dead hand of tradition that weighs you down and represses you. But radical monogamy is the enlightened choice to engage with the dead hand of tradition and shake it and say, you know what, you were right about everything. They've finally realized the value in tradition, but they can only accept it if they're able to rationalize it. And so they have to go on a long journey of making all of these mistakes to arrive at the beginning.
And then they have to express it in radical revolutionary language.
Because that's all they know.
Yeah.
I reached a place where it became clear to me that there is agency and power in questioning these cultural norms. However, monogamy can be a choice that you arrive at after considering your own agency and options rather than a blind expectation. That was always allowed.
Congratulations.
It was always allowed.
You know, you've been shaming people for monogamous relationships for decades, but here we go.
But like no one, like there's not sort of some sort of government diktat that says, right, okay, you get assigned a husband when you arrive at 21 or whatever. You're always allowed to be a spinster if you want. It was just never a very good idea because you're a human. Anyway, Ox says that monogamy is the relationship configuration that works best for me, and that she arrived at the conclusion through a very different route than before. Yeah, you and literally everyone else. Literally everyone else. And there's another guy called Jericho Vincent who uses the term radical monogamy. He's gay and he practices it with his husband and teaches it as a form of intimate relationship. Radical. To a progressive, they're like, what, an intimate relationship? Oh my God. I mean, I'm on Tinder all the time. I mean, I don't know what you're talking about. But listen to this, right? Generation Z, right? Zoomers. Listen to this radical, novel, progressive proposal, right? Radical monogamy works for me because I always wanted a gigantic love. I wanted to be one person's joy and delight, and I wanted them to be mine. Oh, that's so forward-thinking. That's not all of romantic literature from the beginning of time up until now. I can't believe it. I'm so glad someone thought of it, right? Then I grew up and told that was ridiculous, unrealistic, and healthy by progressives.
Yep.
And so I gave up on monogamy and practiced polyamory. But now I've come around to believing that all of those other people's messages were wrong.
Yes, I do. I agree. All of the progressive messages are wrong.
Yeah, it's just start those ones and build outwards from there, right? If approached with intentionality, effort, and a willingness to grow, it is possible to have a love that is big and magical. Bravo. Absolutely bravo. If you're committed to the relationship and the emotions in it, then you can have that love story that you wanted. There we go. Literally, return to tradition.
If you appreciated that segment from the podcast of the Lotus Eaters, you can go to lotuseaters.com to get access to all the premium content we have on the site, such as the book club series we do, this one on Lawrence Wright's The Looming Tower, Al-Qaeda's Road to 9/11 that me and Bo did together. If you want to follow what else I'm putting out, you can follow me at Getter at @Callum on Getter. Thank you and goodbye.